Jesus Christ, I was right. So now we come to the worst of the series, the Nightmare on Elm Street series, with the final film in the original series, up until the non-canonical standalone film Wes Craven's New Nightmare 3 years later, and it's 1991's Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. Which, I mean, just look at that makeup. Even worse than the fifth film. So part 4 was the highest grossing film in the series. It was a huge financial hit. 5 made about half the money that 4 did. And New Line has always been called the house that Freddy built, because Nightmare on Elm Street is the one that made them a profitable film company. But by this time, they had franchises like Critters. They had just started the Ninja Turtles series, and they were able to do more projects that they wanted to do. So producer Robert Shea, who produced all of them, obviously, head of New Line, decided it was finally time to put Freddy to rest. And wow, I'm not even sure where to begin with this. It was directed by Rachel Talalay, who's been involved with every Elm Street film up to this point in some way, whether it be pitching ideas, helping polish scripts, serving as producer. But it was written by Michael DeLuca, who also served as an executive producer on this one. And he actually has written, because I know I've seen that name before. Well, he served as producer on quite a bit of films. He wrote, oh, that's a different Lawnmower Man, but this, In the Mouth of Madness, and the 95 Judge Dredd. But as far as films he's produced, quite a bit. Too many to name. And the thing about this script is it's not like they went into one that was really bad, like Friday 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, which was just poorly received, barely made any money, and then they decided to sell the rights and be done with it. They actually went into this with the goal to kill Freddy off for good. Now, one script involved Jacob from the previous film, who is now in his teens. Freddy kills Alice, and then he was going to go after Freddy in his dreams. And they were going to bring back some of the Dream Warriors. I'm guessing, since they're all dead, they were going to help him in the dream world. They were going to try to get the actors back. Of course, that idea was scrapped, which that to me sounds more like a definitive, cool, fan-pleasing conclusion. But Peter Jackson also wrote an idea where kids are no longer afraid of Freddy. They take sleeping pills to put themselves to sleep just so they can go and taunt and beat up Freddy. And then, because they're no longer afraid of him, but he's able to get a kill in, and then that spreads fear and restores his reputation. And then it kind of starts everything over again. This is back in 91, or probably around 90 when they were making it. This is after Bad Taste. This is after Meet the Feebles. I think it was after Meet the Feebles, before Dead Alive. And Peter Jackson knows how to mix humor and horror very effectively. I love Peter Jackson's older films. And they're gory as hell. To have an Elm Street film that is humorous and as much a splatter film as Bad Taste and Dead Alive by Peter Jackson, I think that would have been awesome. Even if it doesn't have that fan-servicey or fan-deserved service as the other idea, that still would have been pretty cool. But no, they went with this random ass idea, which doesn't even continue with Jacob or Alice or anything. It's this complete standalone story almost. About as standalone as part two, with no characters mentioned or any continuation whatsoever. About Freddy's daughter being the one to stop him for good, played by Lisa Zane, which you also got Sean Greenblatt, Leslie Dean, Yaphet Kotto. Yaphet Kotto from Alien, he's the best part of this movie, without a doubt. And this movie is just gimmicks. It's a gimmick to put Freddy's dead. Hey everyone, it's the final chapter. Make sure you go see it. So you have the curiosity's sake, fans going to see the final film, and the gimmick that the climax is in 3D. Which I think has only been reinstated on the original DVD box set from 99. Maybe the newer releases have the Blu-ray, have the 3D, but when you watch this now, and they make a big deal of 3D, when Lisa Zane puts the glasses on and she's doing like all this stuff, it just looks ridiculous because there is no 3D. But anyway, music is done by Brian May, not the Queen, Brian May. And special effects are done by Giancarlo Beekler, who, even though there was a bunch of different companies on part 4 doing the effects, I guess Giancarlo Beekler and his company were like the main special effects people in part 4. He returned for this one, and no disrespect to Giancarlo Beekler, may he rest in peace. He is one of the best effects artists for the 80s, but Freddy looks awful in this one. He really does. Worse than in part 5, and I've said this throughout this series of reviews, that eventually Freddy, the humor goes so cranked up to 11 that he becomes a Looney Tune character. A Looney Tune cartoon parody of himself. This is that film. To the point where he literally, it shows him like pushing with his back and with his feet a bed of spikes, and then he stops and looks at the camera like he's out of breath. That was intended to look like a Looney Tune bit. There's Breckenmeyer, who people have seen in a bunch of stuff. His death has all the classic cartoon noises, like the running away whistle, the boing boing sounds, spring noises. That like fast pitter patter, like when a cartoon runs in place. All those noises. Very little death scenes. You get like 3 kills in this. And yeah, Freddy is just... His one-liners are the absolute worst. Yes, there was a Nintendo game called, I think it was called Freddy's Nightmares. Same name as the show. I know it's called Nightmare on Elm Street, but some of his one-liners and his voice sounds way different and worse in this one. Sounds as if there's like a kid's game of Freddy. Like, he catches the kid's ear. Nice hearing from you, Carlos. Like, the one-liners are so... It makes dad jokes sound like George Carlin. Like, it is so ridiculous. And the cameos. You have cameos by Alice Cooper, Roseanne and Tom Arnold. Iggy Pop does the title song. Johnny Depp has a cameo, which that's the only one that actually makes sense. Which is cool seeing Alice Cooper, and he plays Freddy's dad. Okay, that's kind of cool. But Roseanne and Tom Arnold, I'm guessing it's because Roseanne was the hottest sitcom on TV at that time. I don't know. And their sequence is really the only interesting aspect to this entire film. Because basically, you have this kid named John Doe. Why is he called that? Because he doesn't know who he is. He's been up, he has amnesia, doesn't know who he is or where he came from, but he's haunted by Freddy. And he eventually believes he's Freddy's kid who's being sent to Springwood for whatever reason. He ends up at this youth center where Lisa Zane, as Maggie, is like the doctor. He meets Breckenmeyer, who's the stoner. Who was it? Leslie Dean, who's kind of the badass chick. She really reminds me of like store brand version of Alice from the end of part 4. And Carlos, who kind of looks a little bit like a goofy Night Stalker, but he has a hearing aid. Yeah, Ricky D. Logan. And Johnny Depp was credited as Oprah Noodle Mantra. Okay. And that's the only cameo that makes sense. Someone that was actually part of this series. But, and then, well, he ends up at the youth center. He has this article about this Kruger woman that's gone missing. Maggie thinks if she takes him to Springwood, they can figure out why he's having these dreams, figure out who he is. The other 3 kids want to escape the center, so they all get in the same van. But when they get to Springwood, and again, this is the only interesting aspect, but they don't really do anything with it. And apparently there was like 47... This film was like 47 minutes longer, but they cut it dramatically. And there was more of this, which they get to Springwood, there's like this never-ending carnival. There's no kids. It's all adults who... They're all the parents of kids that have been killed. And apparently, Freddy has killed every kid in Springwood. Not just the kids of parents that killed him. Every kid. And it's like this dilapidated, post-apocalyptic town, small town, where parents are at the carnival. It's a very run-down, shitty carnival. It's a lot like Silent Hill. Like a very bad Silent Hill during the daytime. Where they're on the rides, they're playing the games. There's one teacher in the school who's giving class to no kids the history of Freddy. And I was like, okay, that's kind of an interesting idea. Just show that the parents have kind of lost their mind. They're all aware of Freddy. And that they realize that he's why they don't have kids anymore. Roseanne even runs up to him and starts doing the, oh, my babies, let me take you home. And this might have been when Tom Arnold was on drugs. Because if you look at him, his jaw keeps doing that. I could be wrong. It's just something I noticed. But her and John Doe separate. And I think the reason why he's John Doe is because they had no idea what they were doing. They were just like, throw a character in there that could sort of be the cipher or the catalyst for how Freddy finds his kid. But give him amnesia, call him John Doe so we don't have to do anything with him. So I had to give him a backstory. We don't even have to make a character. Which just shows... This really is the epitome of how much care they put into the series at this time. Dating all the way back to the 3rd film. I think that's where they really gave up and just started pushing out products. The only death that's somewhat interesting that really feels like an Elm Street nightmare death scene is Carlos. Or, Freddy takes this long Q-tip, shoves it through one ear, out the other, pops his hearing aid off. So then it's all silent. And Freddy's even behind him, going like... then he like just started jumping around making noise. Everything just shy of him behind him with cymbals. Surprisingly, he doesn't do that. He is so much of a cartoon in this that, and yes, Freddy's always been humorous, at least since the third film, but it's darkly humorous. He's never been a Looney Tune. He's never been a clown. It would be like if someone got into a Three Stooges slapping match with Michael Myers, or if someone pied Jason in the face, or if someone did Who's on First with Pinhead or something. That's how goofy this is. And then there's the sequence where Carlos gets his hearing aid back, but now everything's heightened. Like a water drop, sounds like thunder. Freddy drops a pin, but he catches it, then he drops a handful. And then he does this thing where he has this little chalkboard, but he's able to stretch it, then stretch it, and he takes his glove, makes it super loud, and that makes Carlos's head explode. But Freddy's doing like this clawing, like this weird like humpy type dance while he's like clawing the chalkboard. Then Breckenmeyer, who's the stoner, he sees Johnny Depp on the TV doing the brain on drugs infomercial. But then Inagata Devita plays, and it goes into like Beatles' Yellow Submarine animation. He gets sucked into the TV, and then Freddy's playing him. It looks like an Atari joystick, but it looks like a Nintendo game. Not really graphics, just like a cartoon. And it's up close to Freddy, and he's making silly faces. And yeah, when I was a kid, the first time I saw him go, great graphics, I thought that was funny, but just seeing him be like, with the joystick. And yes, there is a nod or a mention when John Doe says, let me go in, then I can grab him. They kick the controller away, but then he's like, you forgot the Power Glove. Yeah, they mentioned Nintendo's Power Glove. Now I'm playing with power. And then in the real world, Breckenmeyer is jumping like this, and he's all stiff, and he's making the cartoon noises. And one of the only lines that gets a chuckle out of me, there are a couple, none of them are Freddy lines, is right before Breckenmeyer in the real world just starts bouncing around, spinning around with all the cartoon sound effects. John Doe says, I have to go to sleep so that I can grab him before Freddy kills him. Maggie says, that's crazy. But then Breckenmeyer bounces up, goes through the ceiling, and John Doe says, and what do you call that? Rational? Just, that always gets a chuckle out of me. And then the cycle of him waking up in the same bed through all the nightmares when he finds out he's not Freddy's kid. That's not why Freddy's keeping him alive. It's so that he could lead Freddy to his real kid. He keeps waking up in the same bed. And then this makes me laugh when he's like, no, that's it. Nothing is going to make me get off this bed. The camera just pulls back a little bit and the bed's on fire. And he's just like, damn it. Small, stupid shit like that made me laugh in it. All Freddy's horrible one-liners with his awful voice. And I believe this is the movie that really started the iconic Freddy laugh. It was always kind of like a sinister chuckle. But this is the one that's like, ha, ha, ha. Or however it goes. And even when he's falling with the parachute, it's like, you think I'm your daddy? Wrong! Cuts his parachute. And then that's when you get the spike bed, when he pushes it out like a Looney Tune. And I'm sure people will find the backstory of Freddy in this one. Which this is the only one where you see Robert Englund as Freddy without makeup. He's appeared in previous films without makeup, as his biological father and other characters, but never actually as Freddy. And so, like, we see him as a young kid, where he kills the class hamster. We see him as a teenager who kills his abusive adoptive dad, Alice Cooper. All the way up until he's playing with his daughter in the garden. His wife screams and comes out, finds out he's the Springwood slasher. And we actually see him without makeup as Freddy. And sure, that is kind of interesting. I've always said we don't really need backstory on characters like this. It really takes away the mystique or the enigma of a character like that. But this movie is so uninteresting and unscary and unfunny that when it adds moments of seriousness, it is kind of refreshing. Which then when young Catherine, which is Maggie's real name, goes in Freddy's lair in the basement, we see all different kinds of gloves. One's with knives, one's with nails down the fingers, one with razor blades on the tips. And basically, yeah, he was the Springwood slasher. His wife found out. He killed her. Then Catherine was taken away from him. That enraged him even more. It plays it off like she was taken away. And then he started killing kids. So, that could be the writing as well. But also it's just not directed very well. And this was Rachel Talalay's first film. And I mean, sure, a lot was cut out. But like, there are scenes that just end. Like, a character barely gets a sentence out. Like, Yaphet Kotto barely finishes what he's saying. And then we cut to Maggie crying at her desk. Or Yaphet Kotto wakes up with a bit of Freddy's sweater. And he's like, I know how to pull him out with this. And it just barely zooms in. And he's just barely finished. And then we fade to black. And then open up again. Almost like a TV movie. Not very well directed. And then it tries to be serious as well with that one girl, Tracy, Leslie Dean. With her backstory and her sexually abusive father. It tries to go down that road as well. But you don't really care about the character, so it doesn't really add anything. And there's the whole climax that Yaphet Kotto, who's like this dream expert, he puts Maggie under, gives her 3D glasses, because that will help her see whatever she wants to see or some shit. And when she grabs Freddy, they can induce a shock that will wake her up. So it's kind of like the first film, only here, when Freddy's in the real world, he still has his powers. He gets, like, he climbs walls in the ceiling. He can look unburnt, and then he's burnt. He can take a lot of hits. Which in this, he's killed by being stabbed a bunch of times, and stabbed with his own glove, and then a bomb is put in his chest. And yeah, it ends with this zoom in, with the fuse going down. He's just like, kids. Then it explodes with CGI Freddy coming at the screen. Which there's like 3 demon fish, CGI demon fish, that I guess are like the dream demons that give him his power. We see them a little bit in the dream world. Then when his head flies out and explodes, we see them kind of swimming around. And they're making stupid noises. They remind me of the fish on Monty Python's Meaning of Life. Which, this is the second time I'm making a Meaning of Life reference. Greta's death in part 5 reminded me of Mr. Creosote from Meaning of Life. I can't really say too much about the CGI. It's 1991, but it still looks like shit. God, they had 2 good scripts that they could have used. Peter Jackson's could have been interesting and cool, especially with his direction and his humor. But that original script with teenage Jacob being aided by the Dream Warriors. Tell me that's not, like, I don't know why. They must, I can't even come up with why that must have been. It literally seems like they were trying to commit suicide with this series. Like, no good scripts. We just have to get one that's half baked, barely makes any sense, is not put well together at all, just so we can end this shit. And this was a big deal when this came out. Apparently, the mayor of, is it L.A.? Was gonna make September 13th, which is the release date for this film, National Freddy Day. I want to say it was, yeah, L.A. Mayor Tom Bradley at the time declared September 13th Freddy Krueger Day. But people didn't like the idea because it was glorifying a mass murderer. But in any case, like, New Line had a big funeral celebration for Freddy with a giant cake. Bunch of cast and crew from previous films came by to celebrate. Of course, this only lasted 3 years because that New Nightmare came out. But yeah, this is such an unsatisfying conclusion. And the series had been on a decline pretty hard since 3. And I still stand by what I said about, where the hell is it? This being a definitive ending. A way to kill Freddy. Worthy opponents from a great cast and great characters. Having Nancy involved, a script that makes sense and is well written, interesting dreams and kills, and yeah, a way that really feels like Freddy's laid to rest forever at the end of this one. But no, they got cocky and they got greedy, and they had to make 2 more films and then this one. There's just more silly scenes, because like when everyone dies, there's like this white transparent spirit thing that goes in Freddy, and I swear there's one where it's almost like seeing Freddy's climaxing face, because he does like this. He makes a bunch of silly faces, and the makeup doesn't help. His voice, his one-liners, just the way he acts throughout the film. Even when there's even a part where he tries to describe how he became this dream infiltrator to Yaphet, but the way he describes it really sums up the effort they put in here. Like, that's why they made me this way. Who? The Dream People. Like, really? We're calling them the Dream People? So on the nose. The only interesting thing I could say is, okay, it shows Springwood like Freddy has won. It's just this rundown, shitty Silent Hill town. No kids. All the parents are crazy because they all lost their kids. There's a scene with this one lady who's completely crazy, who's like a teacher. She reminds me of the aunt from Sleepaway Camp just because she's very unnervingly happy and singing Skip to My Lou. Yaphet is the only cast member that I think does very well. Even with his supporting role and what little he's given. Freddy's backstory feels almost forced, because it's when she figures out that she's Freddy's daughter, but it's like, not only who you are, but where you come from. Freddy is a young kid, and it's just as uninteresting as Rob Zombie's Halloween. Kills animals, he's abused, oh, and now he's a serial killer. Definitely the worst iteration of Freddy. almost every time he's on screen, hell, even the first time we see him, or one of the first times we see him, there's a Wizard of Oz reference with John Doe in his room, and he looks out the window, and we see Freddy on a broom with a cape and a witch hat. Like, I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul too. Ah. Or when he's the bus driver, no screaming when the bus is in motion. Every time he's on screen, it's like if Scary Movie was doing a bit on Freddy. And I remember seeing this as a kid. Again, I got this DVD set when I was 12. I had seen 1 through 3 at that point. So 4 through New Nightmare was all a first time experience for me. And at that time, I didn't really get the concept of having humor with horror. But I remember watching it at 12 and just thinking, like, they really changed Freddy in this. He is not scary. He's very goofy. I mean, he literally is the opposite end of the spectrum from the first film. And the first two to this, where he was shrouded in shadow and just like a little sinister chuckle, a deep demonic effect on his voice, good makeup. Hell, even the back here, that's like a glorified version of what he looks like in this. You can't really see that dopey smile, but that's basically what he looks like throughout this movie. Yeah, I didn't like this movie back then. I've never liked it. I don't like the humor. The story is absolutely nothing. And they really could have continued, because I was thinking about this while I was going through this run through. If you take out 2, there's some pretty good connective tissue throughout all of these, where if you watch any of them out of order, I can see why someone might get lost. It does continue all very well. But this one feels just as out of place as the second film. They could have continued with the Dream Child. Hell, it's even about Freddy's daughter. And the whole thing with Dream Child was making it be like, oh, that's my boy. But it really does feel like they didn't just want to kill him off in film. They wanted to get like the worst reception possible to make sure that it was the last one. Like, this movie is so bad and so laughable that, and not in a good way, that's what it feels like. Yeah. Worst one of the series, without a doubt. I've always thought so. I still think so. This might be the only one I hate. I used to hate Dream Child, but now I just see it as incredibly weak. Not weak enough for me to hate. This film I do hate. This was coming out at a time where 80s slashers were dead, quite literally. I mean, Child's Play was continuing, Hellraiser was continuing, but the big boys were pretty much ending. I think 2 years after this, you had Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, so you had The Final Nightmare, The Final Friday. Then in 96, you had The Curse of Michael Myers, which explains why he can't die, just like Final Friday explains why Jason can't die. This tries to explain where Freddy came from. And yeah, just a piece of shit film. I've always hated it. So now I've gone through the original series. The only one I have left is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And I guess I haven't done the remake. I thought I had, so I'll get to that as well. But yeah, fuck this movie. I've never liked it. I'm sure there's more I could have said, but I've ranted for so long that now it's over a half hour. So, whatever. Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. 3 should have been The Final Nightmare. It should have ended 3 nightmares ago. But anyway, thank you for watching.